You're listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
Oh, yeah. By now, you recognize the intro theme to the Ana Vivo podcast. The number one default theme that comes with all your Rodecaster products.
Bum, 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 no.
It's actually pretty good. I've never switched. So we are using the Rodecaster Pro 2, and this comes embedded in to the hardware, in the software. Welcome back to the Ana Vivo podcast. I'm your host, Tim C. Miller, beautiful Woodby Island, joined today by Sizzly Steve, my brother in partner in crime.
Sizzly. And
today we are doing another short on a trending topic that has continued over a long time. I mean, I remember growing up worried that Al Gore was right and that I only had 7 years left on this earth to live.
Climate change.
And they didn't call it climate change at the time. They called it global warming and a few other
They didn't call it global warming.
interesting things.
Did they call it global warming?
Yeah, it was the early stages of, oh my gosh,
greenhouse gases.
we're
killing
creating
everyone.
the problem. You know, look at the temperatures, look at all this, and so they miscalculated and really, and this will get to the core of it here later in our podcast. They over politicized it, and let money do the talking and everything else do the walking. And they took science out of context, as we do for our own agendas often, and put a lot of fear in people's hearts. So this was the early 2000s.
Well, I think I know where you stand on this.
Early 2000s. And now they've come around and they just call it climate change, which allows for them to really identify it anyway, because, yes, the climate changes. So, but that is a trending topic. We see it from all different sides. We see it through largely the media and the political parties using it as an agenda or talking piece because it is a trending topic, to instill fear, to get people to vote, to get policies pushed, to get money really donated or granted to certain programs or budgets or salaried positions.
Well, you know the government's motto, never let a good disaster go to waste.
Never let something small that could just be nothing. Turn it into something huge.
Yeah, think about how many billions of dollars that they've generated towards these programs.
Right, and jobs they've created for it, and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, if we could strip all of that away and get to the ground truth of just raw, beautiful, untainted, unvarnished science, we would see that the world is, in fact, changing, as it does in its many cycles. And today, with Sizzly Steve, we will be talking about some of that. And one of the more recent examples is our Nobel Peace Prize winner, the most recent one, denouncing climate change. A lot of these scientists had been pressured into conforming with the popular opinion and the squeaky wheel voices of fear that are driving this agenda. But as soon as he received his Nobel Peace Prize.
I'm sorry, it's not a Nobel Peace Prize. It's a Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. It's not for peace. Thank you.
Best Advanced Fellowship Among Nations.
Anyway,
I don't think it's a peace prize.
As soon as he was awarded this
physics.
Nobel Prize, he for physics, it was the most recent guy. He said, "Yeah, that's a bunch of baloney, bahookie, and let's all please get back to science." So without further ado, Sizzly Steve, you want to kick us off on the
controversial climate change.
Controversial topic of climate
So
change.
yeah, so let's start off with those Nobel dudes. So in
and women.
The World Climate Declaration, which is a declaration, has been signed by around 300 climate professors, including Dr. John Clauser, and other Nobel Prize winners, Professor Ivan Gavier, and so forth, have all signed this declaration that declares there is no climate emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Not remotely plausible as a global policy tools. Climate models are not acting like that. Anyways, so what they're saying is basically this is all pseudoscience.
Mm-hmm.
What you've done here is taken, research that we're doing on climate change, and you're politicizing it into a money-making machine.
Right.
It's dangerous science that you're doing. And so they've all signed this thing that says stop taking it too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Essentially. And so John Clauser, in 2010, back during his Wolf Prize awardment ceremony, he said that climate change was no real threat, that the real threat was providing quality living to everyone and the energy needs for the world. So he understood we got to get away from fossil fuels and that kind of stuff because it's not renewable. Eventually, it's going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't saying that the world's going to die if we don't do this. And he was trying to get away from that.
Right.
And then in 2022, during his Nobel speech, he was cut off while he was saying climate change science is a dangerous corruption of science that threatens the world's economy and the well-being of billions of people, metastasized into a massive shock journalist pseudoscience.
Right. Yeah, he was cut off in the middle of his speech by, I believe it was the International Monetary Fund folks. I could be wrong on that. But there was a lot of money backing people that cut him off from projecting this image of that it's not a threat. We don't need to fear it. Because that's what they want you to do. They want people to fear this, quote, fossil fuels, which is not a real thing. They want us to fear this, quote, global warming and other things so that we can be easier to manipulate, control.
Yeah, so that we mask up and stay inside, and
yeah, we could go down all sorts of rabbit trails.
and we can't see our loved ones while they're dying in the hospital.
as they're dying. Right, but Dr. John Clauser understands this, as you just mentioned, with the housing crisis, with the needs of the people. That's the core. Who is on this earth? What is the earth for? What is all of this for? Is for people. We trade one thing over the other, and instead of it's like a seesaw. Instead of putting people at the highest, being served by the world, and realizing that relationships are the key, and survival and the core is growing people, helping alleviate suffering, helping orphans and widows and those less fortunate and destitute. That's the core. But instead of that, people switch that and say, no. People need to serve the earth. We need to protect this spotted owl. We need to protect this sand gopher. We need to protect this gecko. We need to build all of these windmills that cost more in energy to then theoretically get free energy from the wind or whatever. We need to do all of these other projects at the sacrifice of humans so that we can protect the earth. And so they misalign their priorities. And that's, if we take this one step back and we put a spiritual lens on this, we can see that that's exactly what Satan and his cohort of demonic activity wants non-Christ followers to do, is to not put people first and to put the things of the world first, because he knows that that's going to burn. He knows that that's not everlasting. If he can distract us long enough, we'll be ineffective for the kingdom of God. But really, Dr. John Clauser has it right. We have to focus on the plight of humanity. The people need to be served, not the other way around. So continue with this climate change.
Yeah. So let's talk about the difference between climate change and global warming. So
yes. Yeah. It's a good one.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, is the leading international body for the assessment of climate change, and they describe climate change as a long-term change in the statistical distribution of weather patterns over periods ranging from decades to millions of years. It may be change in average weather conditions or the distribution of weather around the average conditions, i.e., more or fewer extreme weather events. Climate change is caused by factors that include oceanic processes, variations in solar radiation received by the Earth, plate tectonics, and volcanic eruptions, and human-induced alterations to the natural world. These latter effects are currently causing global warming, and climate change is often used to describe human-specific impacts. So it's really confusing. Nobody knows what anything means, but
Well, it sounds long term is what it sounds like. Hey, the
climate
world could change, and we need a board to let us know that.
yeah, is the long-term change, whereas global warming is, hey, this is the world's warming up currently, not just the weather's changing,
Sure.
cold or hot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but in reality, we only have historical weather data for like the last 200 years.
Okay.
So, aside from like offshoot accounts of
random volcanic explosions or whatever.
or like
meteorological events.
Yeah, a book talks about a flood,
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're not going to be able to track that. So that is their definition of climate change. The difference between climate change and global warming is just climate change is what's happening naturally over time.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I've seen this in the real world where a client has literally told me, Tim, I'm not buying that property. Don't look for any properties near the shoreline here on Whidbey because of global warming, because it will flood my, I have too much fear that it's going to flood my, flood the house, and, I'll have to have FEMA insurance and have to do all this stuff because of sea level rising. And there's a part of me that is like, okay, you're the client. Obviously, this is, you need to be able to sleep at night. So obviously, we're going to look for something that you're comfortable in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's the other part of me that really wants to dig deeper in that and say, man, let's have a conversation about that, because I would like to learn where you're coming from with all of this information, because
Yeah. Why are you so stupid?
no, not that. But I mean, if you're thinking that the water is going to rise by a foot, which is what it would take in this particular case.
Yeah, in your lifetime.
In your
enough
lifetime.
to affect you.
Then we've already got way bigger problems. If the Earth is heating up enough to cause the ocean to rise an entire foot up over this seawall to this thing, you're already burning. You're something else is already happening.
Yeah.
You're not just waking up, going to bed one night and waking up and your ground floor is flooded. So it's just an interesting concept that to see that there's so much fear that clouds solid science and judgment is what is interesting to me. So there are some cases you've got some notes in here about the Maldives. You want to talk about that? There's some cases where there's actually flooding and tides are shifting and water is going.
Is there?
I mean, again, climate change, not global warming necessarily, but yes, over the Earth will heat for a period of time, cool for a period of time, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I did a deep dive.
Okay.
The historical weather data does show that the world has cycled between hot and cold, and we're right on track for it going right back to the hot zone. But flooding, sea level rise, that's like their big thing, is like global warming is going to melt the polar ice caps, and it's not just floating ice, it's land ice. And so when that land ice melts and enters the ocean, it will raise the entire sea level because it's not already in the ocean.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what they're saying, and their proof is the Maldives. And so I did a deep dive, and there's some other places where they're seeing sea level rise,
like Venice. Yeah.
And I did some deep dives, and I was doing some research, and the consensus is that the rate of sea level rise is projected to rise by about, what's half a meter? 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
By 2100. So what is that? 80 years from now, it's going to go up 1.5 feet across the entire globe.
Dang.
Is what they're projecting.
That's crazy.
Now, they have
We'd all be in trouble.
projecting like a 2 or 3 millimeter rise every year.
See, that would cause me fear.
Right? Doesn't that cause you fear?
1.5 feet is actually a lot when you're distributing that over
The entire world.
The entire world, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water.
So the Maldives only sit 6 meters above the water.
Yeah.
Or 6 feet, 3 meters.
Right. And the isn't Venice even less? Like the high point?
Is 3.2 feet. So those are like right on the water. They're basically floating areas, and I was doing some research, and I'm wondering, why are the Maldives sinking faster than Venice?
Sure.
And I didn't look that up. I said, why is the sea level rising, blah blah, and it starts showing me that it's not rising and they're sinking. And so it's showing me that,
Wait a second.
based on the tectonic plates, it determines how fast or slow they sink.
Sure. Yeah.
And so Venice is just in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
It actually is sinking faster than the Maldives. I think I said that wrong. So Venice is sinking faster than the Maldives because of the tectonic plates in the Mediterranean for whatever reason.
Interesting.
And the Maldives is made up of mostly coral, which regrows and sustains itself. So I then looked up, why is Whidbey Island, what's our sea level rise? Why is it? So like, why are they projecting a foot rise?
Right. If
across
this
the
water
entire
should
world?
go across the world, we should all be going up or sinking, flooded by the same rate.
Right. And we're not seeing that happen, obviously, because Venice is obviously.
Because things are actually sinking, not necessarily just getting flooded.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
That makes
as
sense.
stuff shifts, things move down and up and stuff. And so the Puget Sound is rising at a rate of about 2.5 milliliters per year, which is faster than everywhere else, apparently.
Wow. That's
I know.
terrifying. That should cause us straight fear.
Terrifying. Yeah. So all that to say, there's the average rate of sea level rise, but
Okay.
none of it means anything because
Some things are shifting, and the tectonic plates are shifting things up or down.
things
Yeah.
are shifting up and down. We've seen old things off the coast of Greece, old dock cities that
Yeah.
were giant port towns that were flooded over, and then the water receded so much that now they're like miles away from the Mediterranean.
Right. Yeah, things are totally shifting. You look at the mouth of the Columbia River. We're just in Long Beach, and where there used to be telephone poles out on the beach have now. These were 35-foot, 40-foot telephone poles are now completely under the sand, and the beach has grown much, much, much larger.
But sand just blows.
Sand
blows and flows.
The sand, and then the dunes, and then now the pine trees, and so it's created their property has got larger, not less. And so to that point, like
That's
you
not
said,
a tectonic plate.
No, but
That's
to your
just-
point about the seaports that used to be flooded and now sit on dry land, and people are like, why is there a dock in the middle of the land? Well, 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, it used to be a port city, and so all of the world's water just shifts various places.
Unless the land ice melts.
Unless the land ice melts. Yeah. Well, there's an interesting study. So, University of Washington, right here, is a pretty well-known school, and you want to talk to us about that study that they did? This should help.
I'm sorry. What are you talking about?
The University of Washington case study that they did.
Oh yeah.
And it's not a Christian study. It's totally, if anything, progressive, but it's science based.
Wait, the sea level rise study?
Yeah, the one where they did the sea levels that have risen by
0.4 inches.
Right.
Since
only
1900.
Since 1900. So for the last, I don't know. That's
But the rate
4 inches.
To their defense, the rate has been going up year over year over year.
Sure, but they're expected to only rise an additional 1.2 to 3.4 inches by 2100. And so that's been, I don't know.
As
It just
opposed
seems-
to the other studies that say 1.5 feet.
Yeah, it shows you that, one, nobody can agree. Two, even in the liberal or conservative camps, there's differences of opinions, and how you use the information, it seems to be the culprit.
Well, yeah, we go back to never let a good
Disaster
go to waste. When these studies are commissioned, they're not doing it just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
They're
I'm
doing
bored.
it
I wonder what the sea levels are rising.
because we need funding for this project,
Exactly.
and they need to know, are we affected by global warming? What's the sea level rise? Boom,
Right,
we're
right.
affected. Let's get funding for this project.
For
or this
those of you
project.
that want to practice in critical thinking, I would suggest that whenever you read a study, a case study like one of these, go back and dig through the study and see who commissioned or funded that project. Like you said, it's not just the goodness of their heart or their boredom or their natural curiosity like it used to be. Some cases there are. It's somebody's curiosity. They're sitting on the beach and they're like, "Where does all the sand? What can I do with this?" But a lot of the times it's commissioned and funded by somebody who needs a talking point, needs a bullet on their eval, needs some funding for a project, needs to create jobs real quick, needs to stand up, whatever. And so it's hard in a fallen world to not be cynical, but also it's hard to have real life conversations with people who are just so caught up by fear that this is going to happen. You've heard it all the time, and you hear things enough and it becomes relative truth to you. And so,
Yeah, but I think everyone's kind of turned off after COVID when it's like, they'll do a case study for the whatever temporary drug or test,
Yeah.
COVID test. And so they'll do a case study on people, but they won't do a case study on masks or anything else. And so if it's like a
right.
product that they're selling or that's government subsidized,
Mm-hmm.
all for it. But if it's like, hey, you have to wear a mask, but we're not selling masks. They're not government, provided. There's no funding coming through masks. It's just mom and dad sitting at home sewing a mask together. No one's making money off that. No one's going to do a case study on it. No one cares. And so if there's no money behind it,
Right.
nobody cares.
Money talks, everything else walks. So the topic that has been trending over the last decade, global warming, climate change, where will this go in our future? What does this look like? If you're a non-believer, this is all you have, right? If you don't believe in anything after death, then this is what you have. This in space. You gotta live under the water. You gotta live on this earth. You gotta go out and find a new planet. Absolutely, you should be concerned with saving this, or figuring out a way to get off this planet, or figuring out a way to build a city under the water, because this is all you have, and your generations have, and your legacy. If you believe that when you die, there's something after this life, then it gives you the freedom to kind of step back and look at this with rational eyes and say, why do people say this or that? What is behind this or that? And I think there's a lot of peace that comes from that. You can sleep better at night. There's a lot of other ancillary physical, mental reasons that make this helpful, but ultimately, spiritually, it gives us hope for the future. So, anything else you want to end this on?
Yeah. I mean, when I was shown that greenhouse gases thing by Al Gore, I was in elementary school.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that sounds pretty bad. I didn't know what they were saying the end effect was.
Right.
And then I remember seeing a photo because I was looking it up. I was in 5th grade and I was like looking it up. What is greenhouse gas, all that stuff? And one of the first articles came up was like Al Gore's house versus George Bush's house. And George Bush's house is 100% renewable energy, wind, solar.
Texas farmhouse out in ranch.
It's not even on the grid anywhere. And then Al Gore's house is this huge mansion, with
as many lights as can be.
50 cars and yeah. But I think that I have been convinced by one of my friends that climate change is accelerating.
Sure.
And it very well could be human causation of that.
Yeah.
But I am also convinced by the research I've done and by listening to very liberal thinkers that I normally would never agree with break this down, like these Nobel winners, break this down for me and say, yeah, it's real, but it's not end times real.
Right.
We're not going to kill off all the people in the world. We're not going to lose 50% of our land. The world's not going to burn up.
Right.
or melt away. So I think it's important to, like you said, have some hope for what the future holds and not be totally, oh my goodness, we're going to die. I shouldn't even have kids. I mean, there's people thinking, I don't even want to bring kids into this world because.
Right.
And so if you're
exactly
living your
what
life
Satan
like
wants.
that, yeah,
Yep.
oh man. Do some research, I would say, before you make a huge decision like that.
Critically think. Yeah. Travel some. We're going to talk about one of these episodes. We're going to talk about travel, and there's some real actual tangible benefits to traveling in that most people who grow up in the city and never get out to see things, I can absolutely see why they would have that hold to that view of like, oh my gosh, there's so many people.
There's smog everywhere.
There's smog. I can't get people out, but travel some, go to another state in the US, let alone, another country. All of Europe can fit into, one or two
Wyoming.
states here. So there's a lot of places that people can live. We've got people building their own islands out of plastic trash off the coast of Mexico. And so people are resourceful. We're going to make it, but don't let fear be the guide of your life. Let hope be the guide of your life.
Amen.
And with that, as my kids would say,
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Ana Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.